Alrighty, welcome guys. We are back in the shop here and we're gonna go over a little bit of what happened the other day. I was on a solo mission, just me and the dog. Went out and we had gone to this lake that has a rock spot on it, and typically the bass start to congregate there in the fall. I got to looking around on LiveScope, and sure enough, lo and behold, there they were.
Look at them all.
Deployed a couple cameras and started garnering some underwater footage of largemouth and walleye, and that gets to be pretty darn fun. You know, it was cold fall. I mean, as I'm doing this right now, I look out the window. It's snowing right now, so our open water season is very limited, if not done. Therefore, I'm just gonna go into a little more detail about the day that I had and the jerk baiting that was to follow. After I had gotten some underwater footage, I figured, well, I better catch a couple. And this is the outfit that I pulled out of the rod locker. You know, I'm probably just gonna lay this audio over some of the fish catches. I don't really need to talk about every single fish catch, nor am I going to show every single fish catch that I had that day. But I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a rundown as to kind of the conditions and what happened this particular day. Anybody that loves fishing bass knows that there is just an array of ways to catch them, from open water to punching the thickest mats that you can drive a 2-ounce weight through, you know. So with that being said, this particular day, a lot of fish sucked out of the weeds and they start heading for their winter haunts as that water temperature starts to dip into the 50s. It said it was 53 degrees, you know, so. And those bass, and there was walleyes in there mixed in too that day, but those bass pulled out of the weeds and they kind of came onto this. There's this rock spot that we're familiar with, and they were out there. So we got some really pretty cool underwater footage of bass on rocks, which can be fairly hard to get. Like I said, just the nature of those fish. A lot of times bass just don't use rocks. If the lake has good weeds available to them, it seems to be that a largemouth will prefer to live in a weed bed versus a rock hump. Now, if you live in a lake that predominantly has rock, yes, they have no choice but to live on rock. But it seems like, you know, especially up in our neck of the woods, a largemouth bass is going to prefer to hang out most of its days in a nice weed bed if he has the option. But on this lake, it has a mix of both, and the rock spot that these fish were on apparently becomes pretty attractive to them in the cooler water months. So you can see these fish just hovering around boulders, rocks. There's a little bit of a transition there between rock and mud / gravel, whatever. It's kind of a mix maybe. And then the walleyes are there too. And then with all the abundance of rock in there, I gotta believe that there's a pretty good food source, such as crayfish, that's hanging out in there as well. As far as jerk baiting goes, this is probably one of the more sexy combos that I've put together, and I really like it. That's a Megabass 110 plus 2. Gets down deep. I never changed the hooks or anything. This is just all stock hooks right out of the package. You know, you can take a close look at that bait, and it's a little beat up after that day. We don't have the caliber of bass that some other folks do, you know, like down south. So therefore, I like to fish a little bit smaller combo. You know, we do a lot of smallmouth fishing, and something that just fits nicely in your hand. It's comfortable to fish. I can fish this all day. When springtime rolls around, a combination like this up here in the Northwoods, some days it cannot be beat. So this just ultimately gets glued into your hand and you don't put it down, because there's nothing that can outperform a jerkbait on some days. You know, this is an Arc one-eyed jack. I'm just gonna give you the details on this outfit because I really do love this. Little smaller spool on here, but enough line capacity to make a really long cast. Like I said, this is the custom light. This is a 7.5-to-1, very lightweight, fits in your hands. It's just really comfortable, and I really, really love this outfit. And then the line. I've got some Tatsu. With that being said, that thin diameter Tatsu is very appealing to me. When I want to get a bait down deep, that thinner diameter, this is 12 pound, which is a pretty standard jerkbait line. I will knock it down to 10 sometimes, like on this particular day. Relatively open water, so therefore, you know, I'm not worried about getting fish hung in grass or wood or anything like that. So I was able to get away with the lighter line, which in turn drives the bait down deeper. And then just the nature of this rod is very jerkbait, light line, light hook friendly, I guess, if you would say. I know a lot of guys out in the tournament scene, you know, they'll kind of beef up their line, throwing, I've heard of as heavy as like 17, 20 pound fluoro on their jerkbaits. Beefing up their hooks, putting really, really stout hooks on, so when they do hook one, they just get them right into the boat right away. Totally get that. There's a time and place for that. I get it. What I was doing was not the time and place for that. I wanted to get the bait down deep. It was a very sensitive, cold water sensitive program. I was watching, I was sniping these fish with LiveScope, and they weren't just train wrecking the bait, you know, they weren't teeing off on it. They'd come up, they'd go back down, they'd come up, they'd go back down, and I had to slow my cadence down. You know, it was pretty fun interacting with a bass and or walleye with the jerkbait, because it's such a visual thing. You know, I can see my bait out at 60, 80, 100 feet, and I can see those fish coming up, going down, coming up, looking at it, you know. So it was really helpful to dialing in what needed to be done to catch them. So I tied this bait on right out of the package, essentially. I didn't add any lead strips to this bait. I didn't change hooks. I didn't mess with anything with this bait. Now, there's a million things you can do to jerk baits to tweak them one way or another, you know, between swapping hooks and whatnot. But just this right out of the package, this combo, I feel is like a very, very good combo. The rod is not overpowering. I think you can overpower a jerk bait when it comes to getting a fish hooked. I think it's very easy, if you are throwing a bait like this, to tear hooks by using a too stout of a rod. And I've learned that the hard way. But with this bait, right out of the package, just like this, didn't change hooks, didn't weight it, didn't do anything to it. This combo, this rod and reel line, I hardly lost any fish that day. And I think that's to the action of this rod. I'll be fishing a jerkbait and I'll know I'll have a rod that's a little bit too overpowered. And I'll go, well, I'll just either back the drag off, or I'll just fight him a little, you know, I won't put as much heat on him.
There he is.
You still end up losing fish. The right rod makes such a big deal in getting those fish to the boat once you've got them hooked. You know, you work so hard to catch a fish, and then once you do get that bite, you get him coming to the boat and he tears off or whatever, you know. A lot of that has to do with the rod and the blank and the action. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's been said many of times, a jerkbait is, there's never a bad time to throw a jerkbait. Spring, summer, fall, winter. It is potentially one of the baits that I would choose to pick if I had to pick one bait to fish for the rest of my life, just because you can get real small jerkbaits like little X-Wraps. You can get real big jerkbaits such as, you know, any like a big Canada, Megabass Canada. So you can get them in a lot of different sizes, and you can get them in a lot of different depth ranges. You can get real shallow. Like I could bust the bill right off of an X-Wrap, and now I've got pretty much a surface bait, surface twitch bait. You know, it's still a jerk bait, but I can, you know, and then I can go on totally opposite end of the spectrum and grab this bait, which is probably the deepest diving jerk bait that I own. It just has a lot of appeal to the sizes and the depths at which you can fish. And then just the fact that a lot of different fish bite jerk baits. Anything, anywhere from crappies to, you know, stripers to muskies to bass, obviously. So that's what's so great about jerk baits in my mind. You know, if you're new to jerk bait fishing, you may not be totally comfortable with a bait casting rod, or, you know, a bait caster in general. You know, you can pick up a spinning rod and catch just as many fish on a spinning rod. But for me, you know, like I said, day in and day out, I'm gonna grab a bait caster, something of this caliber of a rod and reel right here. Lightweight, sensitive, just an all-around great jerk baiting rod, I think.